Hi everyone, welcome back to another video in the Web Security Academy series. In today's video, we'll be covering lab number 3 in the CSRF module titled CSRF for Token Validation Depends on Token Being Present. If you do not have an account on the Web Security Academy, you can get one by visiting the URL portswigger.net/websecurity and clicking on the sign up button. I already have an account and I am logged in, so to access the Academy, I'm going to click on Academy. Go down, select the learning path, go down, select CSRF, so cross-site request forgery, go down one more time, and select lab number 3 titled CSRF, where token validation depends on the token being present. All right, let's get started. This lab's email change functionality is vulnerable to CSRF. So we've got the vulnerable parameter over here is the email change functionality, similar to the previous labs. To solve the lab, use your exploit server to host an HTML page that uses a CSRF attack to change the viewer's email address. So the goal is to exploit a CSRF vulnerability to change the email address of the victim user. You can log into your own account using the following credentials, and we've got the credentials right over here. All right, let's access the lab. And while the lab opens up, we'll open up Burp Suite Professional. So for the first part of the video, we'll solve the lab using Burp Suite Pro. In the second part, we'll manually exploit it just in case you don't have the Professional Edition and you want to do this using the Community Edition. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is log in with the account credentials that we were given. And the password was Peter. Hit login. And this is the email change functionality that is vulnerable. All right, so let's set our browser to send requests to Burp and attempt to change the email. So we're changing it to test.test.ca and click update email. All right, that was intercepted in our proxy. So let's send that to Peter and work from there. All right, in the previous lab, we had said that in order for a CSRF attack to be possible, it has to satisfy 3 conditions. The first one being a relevant action, so an action that if you had the ability to perform would cause harm to the client. In this situation, it was an email change functionality. If we were able to change the email of the user to one that we control, then we could use that email in order to reset the password of that account and completely compromise the user's account. And so this is definitely a relevant action. The second condition was cookie-based session handling. So the application has to be purely using cookie-based session handling in order to manage sessions, and this is what it's doing over here. So you could see the session is managed by this cookie over here that is called session. So we've got a session cookie and this is satisfied. The last one is you have to have no unpredictable request parameters. Now, we could see over here, we've got the email parameter. That's definitely predictable because we know that takes in an email address. However, we've got a CSRF token, which is not predictable at all because it's just a random number. So at first glance, this seems to be not satisfied and therefore not vulnerable to CSRF. However, depending on how this is implemented in the backend, it might still be vulnerable. So in the previous lab, the way we bypassed CSRF tokens is we changed the request method over here from post to get. And in the get method, it no longer required the CSRF token. For this lab, what we're going to do is we're going to do the first check that we did in the first lab. So before we changed it from post to get, we checked if the post method allows us to remove the CSRF token. And it said it was missing or invalid, and that's why we had to change it to a get method to bypass it. So for this lab, we're going to remove it and see if that's the case. So let's hit send, and here we go. We get a 302 found, and then if we follow the redirection, you could see that the email address changed to test.test.ca. So let's alter our testing methodology. So we'll put this as number 2. The first thing to do is remove the CSRF token and see if application accepts it. Accepts the request. And then if that doesn't work, then you change the request method from post to get and see if the application accepts the request. Now in this case, it's a really simple scenario, even for a post request. Let's go back. It accepted it just by removing the CSRF token, which tells us something about the backend. If a CSRF token is present, so if we go control that, let's go back. And it's not letting me go back, so we're going to go to proxy, HTTP history, and send this to repeater again. So if we change the token to something that is not valid, let's say W instead of J, it'll say invalid CSRF token. So if a token is present, it'll check to see if it's valid. However, if it's not present, the request will pass through. All right, so this is definitely vulnerable to CSRF, and the reason we don't have an unpredictable request parameter is CSRF token is not mandatory. And so this implementation flaw allowed us to bypass the CSRF token and exploit the vulnerability. All right, so to exploit this using Burp Suite Professional, what you need to do is right-click, click on Engagement Tools, select Generate CSRF POC, and what that does is it automatically generates a POC for you to exploit the vulnerability. Again, if you don't have Burp Suite Professional, don't worry, we're going to script this manually in the second part of the video, and so you could just use your Community Edition. So the first thing you want to do is click on Options, include Auto Submit Script, and Regenerate, and that automatically submits the form for us. Just like in the previous labs over here, you could see a form, and the action is to change the email address over here using the method post, and then it takes in as the input parameter the email address that we want to change, which in this case, let's say test3@test.ca, and then the submit button. When the script is loaded, it automatically submits the form for us instead of us having to submit the button. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy the HTML, go back to our application, go to the exploit server, which is hosting our script, and put it over here. So we just pasted that, and then we're going to click on Deliver Exploit to Victim. And here we go. It says, congratulations, you solved the lab. So now if you wanted to see if it changed the email address, we're going to click on View Exploit. It'll submit it automatically. And here we go. It says the email address is test3@test.ca. All right, so we successfully completed the exercise by using Burp Suite Professional. Now let's do it using the Community Edition and by manually editing the HTML document on our own. So we no longer need the POC generator anymore. So we're going to close that. And we're going to go back to repeater. So in this case, when you're using the Community Edition, all you have to do is intercept the request using the proxy, send it to repeater, and remove the CSRF token, and you'll be at the page that I am at right now. So I'll keep using the Professional Edition, but I just won't use any of the features that the Professional Edition provides. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is save this, and then we're going to script our exploit. So as usual, we start off with an HTML tag or an HTML element because this is an HTML document. Then the body element, and then we'll put a heading. So this is what the user is going to see on the page. And we'll say hello world. Next, we'll create our form element. And let's close that off over here. And we'll say the action is to visit this application over here. So let's copy that. We'll start off with HTTPS. And I'm going to paste over here. And let's toggle word wrap so that we could see the entire thing. Here we go. And then we're going to select the path for the email change functionality. So paste that over here. Okay, that looks good. So the next thing we're going to do is add the method, which is post. And the reason we say post is because we're doing a post method over here. And then we'll also add the ID because we're going to reference this later. And we'll call it CSRF form. All right, the next thing to do is add the parameters that the application takes. So we'll do that using input. We'll say the type is equal to hidden because we don't want the user to know we're performing this action. When the user clicks on our link, the name is equal to email. We get that from this over here. And then the value is equal to whatever value we want to change the email to. So let's say test5@test.ca, and let's close off the input element. And then the last thing we need to do is add a script element that automatically submits the form for us. So we'll say document.getElement by ID, and we want to submit the form, which has ID CSRF form. So that's the element we're going to submit. All right, and let's put that in quotes, and then add dot submit. All right, that looks good. Now, when we were doing this with Burp Suite Professional, we saw that the submit button showed up, and then it automatically submitted it for us, and then it redirected us to the page itself. Now, we don't want that to happen when the user clicks on the link, because the user is going to automatically know that the email was changed. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to put this in an invisible iframe. So we'll use the iframe element, and we'll add the style to be display none, and the name of the iframe to be CSRF iframe. All right, and then add a target over here saying that this should submit in the iframe. So the target is the name of the iframe, so CSRF iframe. All right, that looks good. Let's see if the application timed out. So hit send. It's still at 3:02, so it looks like it hasn't timed out. We'll double check again, and it didn't. All right, perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to host this script on our own web server, and I don't actually need the terminal for this. We could do this using Visual Studio. So we're going to click on New Terminal, and then we're going to use Python 2 for this. If you're using Python 3, it's different syntax. So what this does is it starts off a simple server on localhost, port 5555. So what we're going to do is we're going to send this link to the user. So 127.0.0.1, and then the port 5555, and the name of the script, which is CSRF Lab 03.html. Now the user is going to click on this, and all the user is going to see is a hello world. And in the background, what it should have done is change the user's email to test5@test.ca. So let's see if that actually happened. Let's reload the page and look at it. And it timed out. So in the second that we were waiting, it timed out. So let's close this and create a new instance of the lab. Once we have a new instance, we do need to copy the link and add it into our script. Okay, so the first thing to do is you need to log in, because the user has to be logged in for this attack to work. So you could see over here the email address of the user is the original one. Next, we're going to copy this and put it in here. We're going to save this, and it's still hosted on my simple server. So we're going to send the link again to the victim user and pretend we're the victim, and we're clicking on the link. So what it's doing over here is it just shows hello world to the victim user, and the victim user thinks that they clicked on a harmless link. But what it did in the background is it changed the email address of the user. So let's see if it did change the email address, and it did. Here we go. So it's test5@test.ca. So our attack was successful. Of course, if you're doing this using the community edition, I've already gone through the exploit server, and that's why I've completed the lab. But if you're doing it using this method over here, you do have to go through the exploit server. So you just copy paste your HTML over here like we did with the first part of the video, and then you say deliver exploit to victim, and it should give you a congratulations, you solved the lab. All right, so to recap, we solved the lab first by using Burp Suite Professional, and then we scripted the exploit on our own just using the community edition of Burp.